And one of my friends who was in the September class was graduating. He had worked for a big law firm downtown Chicago, and he got into the interview process and just got too busy. So he told me, I clerk at this firm. I can't do it anymore. Could you just go over and tell them you're here for me, and whatever I was doing, you'll do. So I went over and I walked into place, and it was their insurance coverage department. I said, I'm here for Frank. He can't come anymore, but I'll be, whatever he was doing, I'll do. And it worked out great. And that's how I got into the insurance coverage end of it.
That is crazy.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. I am your host, Megan Henry, and today I'm joined by Dale Diamond. And Dale is the Director of Claims at Namek Insurance Company. And Dale was an attorney by trade for years, and then moved over to claims. It just has like a very interesting career path and story. And frankly, he and I end up talking shop about days and working at, being an associate in a law firm, and, how that impacted us and the stressors that you had there. So, I think anyone who's coming from that sort of background will really relate to some of the things that Dale and I have to talk about that. So with that, let's bring him in. Good morning, Dale. Oh, actually, good afternoon, Dale. How are you? Welcome to The Defense Never Rests.
Good. I'm good. Good afternoon, Megan. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing well. It is spring break here in New Jersey, although my kids are not home today. So I shipped them off for the day so I wouldn't be interrupted.
Yeah, no, the spring break is kind of varies a little bit by schools, but there's a lot of folks down here in Florida on spring break, so it picks up a little bit this time of year.
Yes. Oh yeah. So you are, I forgot that you're in sunny Florida, where I think everybody I know is right now, except me. So I'm sure you do have an influx of spring breakers down there right now.
Yeah, and it's been nice weather. So, and I guess it's still a little bit cool back your way, cool and rainy from what I hear.
Yeah. Yes. It's like 40 degrees out today. It's not super pleasant. But I'm so happy to have you join me this morning or this afternoon on this podcast. Like you and I had talked a few times leading up to this, and I really just wanted to dive in a little bit to you, and tell your story a little bit, and how you ended up where you are now. Right now, you're the Director of Claims at Namek Insurance Company, but this is not where you started. You went to law school. You were an attorney, so I kind of want to hear about your path specifically right now. Everyone has a different story how they ended up in law school. So what was your process in deciding, that was the career avenue you wanted to take?
Well, I always, going way back, I always had an interest in law, and kind of that's the path I wanted to take. And then I went to my last couple of years of undergrad out at UCLA in Los Angeles, and had a wonderful constitutional law professor named Dr. Hobbs. I think it was Dr. David Hobbs, if I remember right. And that kind of piqued my interest in going to law school. Unfortunately, being one of 5 kids when I got out, and with the cost of things, there was no money for law school at that time. So I knew if I wanted to go, I was going to have to get out and work. So I worked and always worked in sales, and then in restaurant management, and just kind of kept putting away the money. And I was out longer than I had planned. So I actually ended up being out about 7 years, if I remember right. And I'd kind of switch off from media sales and into restaurant management. But both were kind of great training and background to go to law school. So by the time I could go, by then I was living in Chicago, was general manager of a seafood restaurant in Evanston, Illinois, and kind of putting away my money and trying to save up enough for law school. And finally in January 1991, started law school in downtown Chicago.
So did you find, going to law school after you've saved for it yourself, and doing, having another career path before, and did it make you more focused and more serious when you actually started?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the maturity was better. A few things happened. One, I was really lucky. I was paying cash for law school from what I had saved, but I was very lucky because I went to the John Marshall Law School, which is now part of the University of Illinois Chicago Law School. Just recently, they became affiliated. but at the time it was John Marshall, and I did get half scholarship, so they picked up half the tuition. And I think that was based on my background, having not gone directly to law school, but having kind of a different background. So that helped a lot. And like you said, Megan, the fact that, I really worked, I put in 80, 90, 100 hours a week in that restaurant. And if that money was going into law school, I was not going to waste it. So, I did not miss class. It was what I did. I took it real seriously.
Yeah. I mean, I found that I took some time in between undergrad and law school too. And I did feel like I had a little bit more focus going in, like it wasn't just a continuation of college to me, which I think that mentality I think happens when you go straight in because you're like, oh, I don't know what else to do. I mean, I admittedly went to law school because I didn't know what else to do and I knew I needed to do something. But I definitely was a little more focused, I think, than some of my classmates who went straight through. Did you have that like similar experience?
Yeah, I did. There was a group of us that I kind of, we sort of banded together. Some of us, my best friend in law school was a CPA who had worked long and hard and just found that a little boring and decided he wanted to go back to law school. So there was a group of us who had worked real hard. And it was interesting because, as you know, they do the Socratic method. So, first day, some of the professors did some intro, but I'll never forget our property professor said, well, you've heard the intros. We're going to get started. And he just looked me right in the eye, called me. So I was first one up, first day. And then after that, I was called on 3 more times in the other 3 classes. And I did, by the time I was graduating, I asked Professor Carr, what was up with that? And he said, that was done on purpose, just because of being older and having a background, in sales and marketing and management. They thought that, I would probably do pretty well. So he said, he told me, he said, you didn't think that scholarship was free. But it was a great experience. I really enjoyed law school.
Yeah, see, I was always terrified about the Socratic method. And it wasn't like I went to class unprepared. I was just terrified of getting called on and saying the wrong thing, or it was scary for me. And eventually, it got easier. But I remember that first year, I was like, please don't call on me.
I think that's how we all were.
So you go through law school though, and what was your idea for next steps when you graduated?
I was really I liked it all, from the family law classes to my labor and employment, which was kind of my focus. There's certain things I knew, even though I liked them, I probably didn't want to go there career-wise. Criminal, probably something I didn't want to do. So I really thought that I wanted to be involved in labor and employment. But when I got out, it was just kind of happenstance that I ended up on the insurance end of things. A friend of mine, we were January class, so there was a small group of us who started January. And one of my friends who was in the September class was graduating. He had worked for a big law firm downtown Chicago, and he got into the interview process and just got too busy. So he told me, I clerk at this firm. I can't do it anymore. Could you just go over and tell them you're here for me, and whatever I was doing, you'll do. So I went over and I walked into place, and it was their insurance coverage department. I said, I'm here for Frank. He can't come anymore, but I'll be, whatever he was doing, I'll do. And it worked out great. And that's how I got into the insurance coverage end of it.
That is crazy. I've never it reminds me of the movie Step Brothers, where they go on the interview together. It's almost like that, well, we're a pair, so I can't come today, so Dale's gonna take it for me. What did they say? Were they okay, great?
They were said, okay, great. It was funny because it was at the time there was just a ton of work going on the asbestos litigation with all the Chicago public schools, with the asbestos in the buildings, and then all the sudden and accidental. There was a big case involving Waukegan Harbor, North Chicago, where they had been dumping PCBs in the harbor, and they were all in that. So they just needed someone to, do the research, do the case citation. I had been on law review, so I knew how to, do briefs and edit and do case citation. And they were happy as can be. And just, thank goodness there wasn't cell phones back then, because they were relentless. And I just started spending more time over there than at school. So, and it was funny because with mostly the associates I worked with over there, they got very possessive of me. So they would actually kind of fight over who got my time. And it was pretty funny to be over there. But, at the end of the day, after all that work, the way things worked, I wasn't one of their summer associates. So didn't get the offer there, but I did end up at a firm that had fairly recently split off from that firm. So, they knew of the firm. So that kind of launched me into insurance. And when I did interview when I was graduating with a guy who I still kind of keep in contact with via LinkedIn, he's still working. And I'll never forget the interview with him. He was the name partner, and his interview was, I hear you do insurance coverage work. And I said, yes, I do insurance coverage work. And he said, do you like it? And I said, yeah, I like it. And he said, are you crazy? And I said, I don't think so. And I got the job. So that was my interview.
Well, that's every crazy person's response. No, I'm not crazy.
No, they were all pretty crazy over there, but had a ton of work. And then it was, just diving right into it. They was a group of like 4 or 5 partners. I don't think any of the associates wanted to do coverage work. And, I was trying to study for the bar, and they just kept piling the work on. I remember saying, this is great, but I need a little time to study for the bar. And one of them looks at the other and says, do you think we picked the right guy? That was my experience into the law firm. So,
and so did you stay in the coverage space while you're practicing?
I did. I was in coverage. We had I did a lot of bad faith litigation. So a lot of things. The thing that, Megan, that was really interesting was kind of the mistakes and the messes some of these insurance companies had made of these claims that didn't have to be that way. So we did a lot of bad faith litigation and tried to really, the best that we could, resolve problems and limit the damage to these insurers. But there was only so much you could do at the stage that you got the facts and the litigation in. So I just thought eventually I could probably be of more value actually at the insurer before things went went downhill quick. So after about 6 years, I decided to go in-house via the claims route at the carrier.
Now, did you find, and I'm just curious, before you decided to leave, was there pressure from some of the partners to like bring in clients or, in order to be on like a partner type track, or was it just, you were just putting your head down and doing the work?
There was pressure from the firm. It was about 85 lawyers, and a really good friend of mine still there. I still work with them. It was a good firm, but it was really, really tough. And there's limited amount of clients when you're in the insurance end of it, all the big ones, and they had worked with everybody. They had been around a long time, but they have, I'll just give you an example. We used to go on like a dinner cruise on Lake Michigan with all our clients. And, you're supposed to, it was really meant to greet the clients and establish, work with relationships. But the partners really didn't like you talking too much to their client, but then you weren't really supposed to just as associates hang out in a group and talk with each other. They'd say, that's not why we had you here. So it was really a no-win situation. I used to say, I'd tell the other ones, I just felt like jumping off the boat and swimming to shore because anything I did was going to get me in trouble. You know what I mean? So it was very hard.
That's why they do a dinner cruise too, so you can't leave.
Exactly. You're stuck out there not knowing what to do. You end up just kind of going off in the corner by yourself because it was really, you get that eagle eye if you were talking to someone who was, a big client of one of the partners. So not a whole lot you could do that was the right thing.
Yeah, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like that's, I mean, and I'd been in scenarios like similar to that. Actually, on dinner cruises, I swear it's like the thing you do to trap the clients and the associates. But I remember so much that pull, like, oh, I can't, like, I'd rather just talk to, you know, Sally, who has an office next to mine, and chat about whatever, but we're not supposed to talk to Sally. So I got to talk to client Greg, but not too much. Like it's hard, you know, and it's not like you're going to say you have a really great conversation with, you know, Greg. It's not like if Greg sends you work, you're probably not going to get credit for it anyway, you know? So,
yeah, exactly. You know, you don't, it's like existing, you know, unless somehow you had some family connection or something, it was going to be a tough road to the partnership track.
Yeah. And something that comes up a lot, I find on this podcast, a lot of people talk about is, you know, and I'm wondering if you had this experience, like the higher up partners, was there anyone like explaining to you like how to go about marketing and networking? Because I felt like I didn't have that guidance. I was just told, oh, you have you're outgoing and you should market. But I had the faintest idea of what that really meant.
Yeah, no, it was a good firm, but the firms, I just don't think that's their strength. Everyone's so busy and doing their thing, and there wasn't really a plan. So it was more a sink or swim. They kind of throw you in, and a lot of the associates who came straight out of school struggled a little bit. I mean, the main thing I had going at the school I was at, being downtown, you know, we knew our way. By the time we got to the firm, having clerked, you know, I knew my way around the courthouse, and I knew the judges, and I knew the clerks. So, you know, what we really were best at was going over and doing motion practice and filing things and doing easy motions, maybe arguing a few simple ones, especially the ones that were going to be losers. They'd send us over to, you know, to go get beat up. So that's what they really liked. And no, there wasn't a whole lot on marketing, and there wasn't really a lot explained about the whole partnership process. It was just, you know, if you put in a lot of hours and you can bring in some business, you'll probably do okay. The people that really did better were when they hired laterals. It seemed like they had more success. They could come in and hit the ground running, and they could actually sometimes bring some business with them from their other firms. So they really had a leg up on the people that were hired right out of school.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard too, though, because it's like, you could see them bring over a lateral with maybe some business. You're like, okay, well, that's great. Like, but how do I get there? You know?
Exactly.
So, you know, so you eventually decided to leave, and you went in-house to an insurance company, right?
Yeah. And,
so, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, we were just, at some point, you're seeing what else is out there. You know, my wife is in the business too, and she had gone to the claims side. She had a really varied practice. She had done all kinds of different things. But when we had kids and small kids, and you know, the hours were pretty grinding. So she went claims side first and said, hey, this is pretty good life. You're still doing the legal work, you know, and it's a challenging, but you know, instead of doing the work all weekend, you're, you know, giving the work to the law firms and just supervising. So at that point, I decided to make that move. And the companies, especially around, you know, Chicago, there are a lot downtown Chicago, were really looking for claims help at the law firms and looking for associates with that, you know, 3 to 5, 6 years experience who could come in and handle pending a claim file.
So did you have a hard time though with, I mean, on paper, yes, the transition sounds great. Like, okay, we have young kids, you know, you lose the billable hour, but I've heard a lot from people who've made that jump. Like, that transition can still be difficult because you're going from, you know, billing, where you can, you know, you're an income maker and your worth each day is like, oh, well, I put 8 on the board. I put 9 on the board. And now you have to shift your focus away from that. And I've heard a lot of people say that, you know, they, as awesome as it is, they struggled with it.
Yeah, a lot of people struggled. My transition was pretty good. Just with, you know, when they used to do a lot of these Myers-Briggs and personality tests to see what you did. But where I went at the time, it was Coregis, and it was lawyers, malpractice claims, and they were the bar-sponsored carrier in places like Pennsylvania and in Ohio and Michigan. And they basically wrote a lot of the solos, small firms, a lot on the plaintiff side, and the claims were just coming in. So you did get a huge pending, but the way I always worked, it was kind of bottom line. I could go through the file, and what I like to do is resolve them. So I would do a lot of mediations. I would do a lot of, just directing counsel to get these things wrapped up. So quickly I got in that groove of just closing files. It was, a lot of people really struggled if they were really into the details. So I got into that pretty quickly and was supervising a team pretty quickly. Most of the people who came from firms, and you had to work with the attorneys a lot to say, hey, you're making the call on whether the attorney should file a motion for summary judgment. You don't want to be reading over their motion for summary judgment and red penning it. That's not what we do here. You've got 200 files. So some people did struggle, and you'd see some who would go back into practice, say, you know what, this just isn't for me. But pretty quickly I thought, this is more what I like to do. So I became comfortable with that pretty fast.
So I know, during your time doing that, was there any aspects of or when you're suddenly managing outside counsel and dealing with outside counsel, were there things that stuck out to you that you're like, oh, I used to do that, and now I realize I shouldn't have done that. That drives me crazy, or something. Did you pick up on anything like that?
Yeah, well, we knew, coming out of practice, it depends how aggressive some of these firms are. I mean, we knew, even though, it wasn't said, that when you get a file in at the firm, that, you didn't really want to resolve it too quickly. And it was a little different at the carrier. They thought, hey, if you can get it done in 12 months. So there's that, even though you want to partner with your counsel, there is that tension of, there's different goals here. Mm-hmm. Of course, the firm wants to bill and needs to make their money. And the company's got these files, especially where we were coming in so fast, they need to turn them, even if something's maybe more defensible. It's like, yeah, but we always said, a closed file is a happy file. So there was always that tension of trying to get on the same page with your counsel to get the best resolution when our goals were a little bit different.
Yeah. And I mean, and I hear that that comment about, the attorneys feeling like they need to bill rather than getting rid of files so often. And I feel like it's so it's such a misconception, because get rid of the file. You get rid of the file and then don't bill very much on it, and then maybe you'll get another one.
Exactly.
Or do you feel that that you're not confident in yourself, that you're not, do a good job?
That's how it should be. It's hard. It depends how the claim department's set up. Because some claim departments, like when I worked in, for say example, the Pennsylvania bar, I mean, I had just so many files out of Philadelphia, so many out of Pittsburgh. I could feed a firm all day long. And so that's exactly what we did. I'd say, we got to handle these efficiently. I need you to make the call within 12 months. Is this something we can try? Is this something that needs to be resolved? As we get into discovery, is it going to get worse? Is it going to get better for us? And I said, if we're efficient, if you're upfront with me, they'll just keep coming. And eventually you're going to get that file that for whatever reason, you've got an unreasonable plaintiff or whatever it is, we're going to have to take it the whole way and you're going to bill plenty. But just, work with me on this.
Right.
It's harder. Some of the claim departments are set up where, my claims could come from anywhere in the country. And maybe I'm working with a firm one time. They don't know who I am. All of a sudden they get this random file because I was looking for somebody, in Spokane, Washington on a one time. And then it's a little different. You can't say, let's get this done. And, and it depends on the firm. I know that you can just tell some of the firms, there's the practice is set up where, the file comes in and you do your motion to dismiss, maybe one or two if it's dismissed without prejudice. You do the written discovery, you take some depths, you do your motion for summary judgment, whether there's fact questions or not. It's just like, this is what you do. Mm-hmm. And then when you get to that point where you've done all that, then it's time to talk settlement. But I'm trying to talk settlement. We look at the complaint, look over the facts, get the file materials. I'm like, oh, this is bad. And you're trying to get it settled. So sometimes there'd be a little push and pull. I used to tell the claims teams, I said, these files, just think of your files like, fish. It's, it hits your desk. If it smells a little right now, you need to get rid of it because it's just going to get worse. So you have to be able to pick out the bad ones, and you have to work with your counsel because those bad ones the more you dug in, they keep getting worse. So it's hard for some people to make that early call. They want to dig into every fact and try everything. But somehow it's, how they can, that way they can get out of control. And that's when you start hearing from the bosses. It's like, what happened here? You spent $250,000 and now you got to tell me we have to settle for the $1 million. Couldn't we have done this earlier? So it's tough and it's challenging. I'd always tell folks handling claims that, just get used to the fact that whatever you do is not going to be right. That's just the nature of the claims business. If, you set your reserve too low and you have to settle for more, that's obviously a problem. Now you've under reserved it and you've messed up the actuaries and the underwriters. Now, if you set it too high, you think, well, I had it reserved at 600 and I fell for 400. I should be a hero. It's like, no, you over reserved, and you messed up the actuaries and the underwriters. And then, if you reserved it at 500 and settled for 500, it's like, oh, well, you just went to the mediation and threw your reserve at them, and got it done. So it's like, whatever you do is not going to be correct. So, just have thick skin.
I know, but that is hard though. It's like a hard idea to come around to because, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
So, and I think you and I had talked about this before, but so you worked for a long time at a larger insurance company, and then I think you retired for a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah, well, what happened? My career path was interesting. It was really good because I came through the claims end and handled claims and did claims management, and eventually went back to handling claims. I remember interviewing. I went 1 year to a .com back in those days. So I was out, but always thought, if this doesn't work out, I'll just go back and just handle a claims desk because, there's always availability there. And I remember I went to a company that was as close to my house. It's called Shan Moorhan. Now it's just part of Markel Corporation, which is a big company, a great company. And I remember interviewing and they kept saying, it's not management, it's just a desk. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I really like working my desk. So I did that for 3 years. And that was where I really handled a lot of the employment practice cases, which are really interesting and very challenging just because of the dynamics. And, you get a lot of personal feelings into it. And so you have to convince people to kind of put that aside, all that personal animus and get the thing resolved. So that was a whole new challenge. But I did that for 3 years and then was perfectly happy, but was kind of called between our head of claims and our head of underwriting. They had a position that they were filling to be a product line lead. So it was on the underwriting side, which I hadn't done, but it was really just to keep the product line profitable. Their big problem was, handling the EPL claims and making sure they're profitable in California, where it was really tough. So they were struggling. So I met with the head of underwriting and made a jump to the underwriting side. And my thought really was, I like claims because, my background's legal and this lets me use my legal training, and that's getting farther away from what I went to law school for. But when I got in, it was nice to do something different. And it went really well. We were very successful. It was also, more lucrative than claims to be on the underwriting side for sure. So I did that for 3 years and then all with the same company. And then they moved me again into this regional management position, managing a group of 25 underwriters and handling all their East Coast business. So it was, $140 million worth of business that was very profitable. And just working with your brokers and product line leaders, you're kind of just a referee, but it kept moving me farther from the the legal end of it, more into marketing and people management and those type of things. But it was interesting. So the nice part was to keep doing something different and learning the whole business as opposed to just being focused on the claims end. So that was kind of my progression through the insurance world.
And, when you moving into that role, did you have like a greater appreciation as to how like everything worked? Because you're seeing, multiple sides of it.
Yeah, exactly. It was really good to know the whole process. And I think that's one reason they moved me over, is because I understood claims. A lot of times there's issues of communication between the claims team and the underwriting side and the actuaries. And claims sometimes can be sort of forgotten about. Even the place I was, we were, on a different floor and we were locked behind a door. And so part of what I did was just try to improve the communication between the claims team and underwriting and the actuarial side, because we all do work together. I always said it's kind of like, moving gears between claims and actuary and underwriting and marketing. And if one of those gears is out of whack, the whole thing kind of goes off. And claims is so important because they set the reserves. And if you're not setting reserve right, you're not pricing right, you're not putting up aside enough money to pay your claims, and it can really take you down a bad path. And that's how a lot of companies become insolvent. It starts with poor claims handling.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely, something that is kind of lost on one end, especially I think with attorneys, that when they're reporting to their claims adjusters and, giving a settlement range or whatever, a lot of them don't understand the domino effect of that report and how it affects not claims, but over on the underwriting side.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there should be more communication and more understanding about how what claims is doing affects what else is going on in the company. There's one company I was at where we did have the meetings. I was on the claims side, and you'd meet with actuary and underwriting, and we were handling a lawyer's book of business. And it would start out with actuary. They always started a meeting and they'd say, we need to increase the rates. We're just not getting enough premium to handle the losses. And then underwriting would say, well, we can't, we won't be competitive. If we increase the premiums, we're only going to write the worst of the worst, and the situation's just going to get worse. And, they'd say, well, the problem is that claims is over reserving. That's why you think we need, more premium. It's probably not as bad as you think. And then we'd say, we're not over reserving. We're giving accurate reserves to actuary, and, and then they're doing, so it's kind of like, finger pointing. We just go around in that circle, and it was really hard to figure out, what to do, because everyone had their own interest in trying to keep their part of the operation viable, but they sometimes didn't go together. So it can be, the big challenge is getting in sync, where you've just got a balance where you're pricing right, you're handling your claims well, you're reserving right, and then actuary can come up with the pricing that, the underwriting needs to stay profitable.
Yeah. So, tell me though a little bit about how you ended up at Namek. Because you did take some time, and then I think they lure you back, be like, Dale, we need you.
Well, the company I was at, Markel, eventually reorged, and reorgs are tough. I mean, it's such a great company. When they came, they said, no, we were in Chicago. We loved it. We loved working for Shand, Moorhan, it was at the time. And we were our own little, even though we were part of this big company, we were our own little world. So it was the best of both worlds. And I remember when they came and said, we're going to just change up everything. We all felt like that in the pit of our stomach. We're like, what does this mean? So for me, they wanted me to go out to New Jersey because I handled East Coast business. So, if you've ever, I wouldn't recommend moving teenagers, to a different state. It was not not pleasant, but the company had been great to me, those kids wanted to go to college too one day. So it's like, you know what, we're going. And I went out there for 3 years, but the reorgs are real hard. And they came out fine, but it was a rough time for the company. And so I ended up leaving and joining a company that was another large company, W.R. Berkeley. But what they do is they have a bunch of subsidiaries, like 50 or so, and they were starting a company, and I knew the person who was starting it. So it was a startup, but with, a lot of backing. And that was interesting. It was just such a good experience too, because it was building a product from nothing. I had always taken over nice, healthy books of business, at 40 million or 140 million. This was zero. So they had tried to write professional liability business and just had no luck. So they brought me in, and I was there 9 years, and it was great. I had a great team. We all stayed together for about 8 of those years, and built that book from zero to ended up writing more than 100 million very profitably in a tough market. So we took a lot of pride in what we did, and they moved me out. I ended up out in the satellite office in Denver, which was another move, and but we liked it out there. And but eventually, that the person I worked for retired, and it was time to do something else and time to move down to Florida. My son's here, and we were getting a little older. We wanted to go to Florida. And so once my wife could work remote with the pandemic and all that, we decided to move. But I knew I wasn't ready to retire. I didn't necessarily want to put in the 80 hours or 90-hour weeks or travel constantly anymore, but I wanted to stay in the business. So I was looking in claims or underwriting, but I really felt like that pull back to claims because I missed the legal aspect of it, and it is really what, of all the things I did in insurance, it's pretty much what I enjoyed the most was handling those claims, doing the mediation, working with my counsel. So I was hoping to be able to get back into that, but as you get older, it's a little tough. So it took a while, and I sent out probably about 200 resumes, got a few interviews, and some were tough. I mean, the interviews, my background really wasn't on the medical claim side, so I did those interviews, but I can see there's stronger people out there on medical. But I did get the one offer, which was from Namek, which again is something, it's different because they're an association. Namek's the Association of Mutual Insurance Companies, and they've been around since the late 1800s. So the company I work for is actually owned by the association members, and they have their board. So it's different from working for these big, publicly traded companies.
Sure.
But it's a great group of people, and I was doing it part-time and really enjoying being back on the claims side. And then there were some changes there. My boss, who was head of claims, became president. The other claims person I was working with ended up leaving at the same time. So it was just me. And my boss said, can you, stay and be our director of claims? I know the plan wasn't to work a full-time job again, but they're just such a good group. And, she's such a good person, and the whole management team was great. So I told her I wouldn't do this probably for anybody else, but, in this situation, I'd be glad to do it. So it was definitely challenging to try and do that on my own,
Now, how is it? Sorry, there's someone just pulled in my driveway, and I'm like, who are you? What are you doing?
Not expecting company.
No, it's the propane guy. He's dropping off the propane tanks. How is the dynamic though different at where you are now compared to Markel or some of the larger insurance companies? Because as you said, it's different. Like it's a trade organization that the insurance company is part of the trade organization, and there's a board. So how is the dynamic a little bit different?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is different because our insureds are also our members. So we have to be careful. We can't give coverage where there's not coverage, but there's definitely we're not denying coverage as often. That's for sure. And we do have to remember, that these are, when the claims come in, that these are not only our insureds, but they are members of the association. And the board who I kind of answer to, we talk about claims, they're also association members. So there's not that focus, even though we want to make an underwriting profit, you're not focused on, the shareholders. You're more focused on your, association members, these folks who work these mutual companies. It's also because they are mutuals, we do insurance company, professional liability, and agents, E&O, and some EPLI, but you're working a lot of times with smaller companies, either a small mutual or an agent, a lot of rural. We do a lot of like farm policies. We do a lot of crop type business, and you may be working in more rural jurisdictions, which is interesting. You have to make that call. Do I try and find, a local attorney somewhere, out in Eastern Kentucky, or do I go to Louisville and just go with one of the firms? Because, having practiced myself, even around Chicago, sometimes when you went out into the collar counties, you were the Chicago attorney, and you weren't part of that club. And sometimes, things didn't go that well for you, going up against a plaintiff who was part of the local community. So those are the type of decisions that are a little bit different. When I was at the bigger companies, we just had, like in Philadelphia, we had our 5 firms, and that's who we used. And we were mostly either in the federal courts in the Eastern District of Philadelphia, or you'd be in state court in Philadelphia or Montgomery County, or here you could be anywhere. We're up in North Dakota and northern Minnesota, and so it's very different. It's a different challenge, and a different level of sophistication sometimes for a small insurance company, where when you're working with some of these big law firms we insured, the claim's not fun for anyone, but for some of these smaller mutual companies or a small agent, it could literally put them out of business, and it's very personal. So you have to be aware of that. And also, when someone's from a smaller community, it may, be the talk of the town that this happened, that, the client of the insurance agent was not happy and they're going to court, which is kind of a big deal. So you're dealing with personal. It's not just business. It can be very personal between the parties involved. And so you just want to be cognizant of that when you're trying to get things resolved.
Yeah. And like when you mentioned, having, a claim in North Dakota, and even just trying to find counsel wherever you are there. Because it's a large state, but not very populated, and you probably don't know many people there, and then having that same impact of it being, close to home, and people might be talking about it, and you don't want to reach too far out of where you are, that because it could negatively affect that claim, and you don't want that either.
Exactly. And the tendency was, especially when you're really busy, is, and some of these, especially the insurance company, professional liability, some of them have larger deductibles, just to go with the suggestion of your insured. Sometimes that works out fine, but sometimes that can really be a nightmare. It could be someone that, may not have that experience, or may also be personally involved. Sometimes they're even, are probably conflicted out. They'll say, "Oh, well, my attorney's handling this," and it's like, "Well, your attorney was part of the decision process." If say it's an EPL, it's like, "Well, who advised you to fire the person?" And you're like, "Oh, my attorney." "Oh, the attorney who's now defending you." Like, well, no, that's not going to work. And it's hard to explain that sometimes, that they can't use their personal attorney.
Yeah, and especially because a lot of people might use their personal attorney for everything, and it's not like it's their friend and they trust them. And
exactly.
Now you're like, well, no, now you got to use Mary. Sorry.
Yeah.
We're sending Mary over to help you.
Yeah, and it's tough, but they're with their friends too sometimes, just being friends. Even with a good legal background, it's hard for them to be objective, and we really need someone to look at the facts objectively. And they'll jump in and say, "No, he didn't do it, and this is defensible," and we'll take it all the way to trial. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I'm not seeing this the same way. And we need someone who's going to take an objective look at the case and do what's best, not only for the insured, but for us as well. Because as you know, these things, once they kind of get off on the wrong foot, even the smallest dispute can end up turning into kind of a rather large nightmare.
Yeah. So one thing that you and I had talked about when we talked on the phone, I guess a few weeks ago at this point, is some of your pain points, and now that you're in the position of, being the director of claims, and you have to manage, counsel all over. We just talked about it. What are some of your daily pain points that you see in your position?
A few things that are tough. One, with professional liability, because you're talking about people's professional reputations and things, we do have the consent to settle policies, and you really need written consent. And so that can always be difficult, where you've got everything set up, the plaintiff's being reasonable, your defense counsel's put you in a good spot, and you're ready to get the thing wrapped up. And maybe it's, a little more than you think you should pay, and the plaintiff thinks it's a little less than they should take. And everything's set except your insured saying, well, no, I'm not going to consent to this settlement. I don't think we should pay anything. I didn't do anything wrong. So that can be difficult. And usually insureds come around. I used to, when we were doing a mediation in person, that was sometimes the bigger challenge, was getting my insured on board and getting that written consent. And like I was telling someone the other day, a lot of times I did it. I just come in the night before, and we go to dinner and buy a steak and a glass of wine and just sit and talk about it and say, think about this. This could be a problem, especially on something like an EPLI. You don't want the papers to pick this up, and the whole story. Juries are unpredictable. I get it. I'm sympathetic. I think you do have a good case, but we don't know what a jury's going to do. Who's going to be the foreman or foreperson. It's just, you want the certainty of the settlement, and of course the settlement, you're not admitting anything. In fact, you're saying we didn't do anything wrong, but we're settling it to end the litigation. So usually you could get it. Very few times where I found someone really dug in and said, nope, I'm not going to agree to any settlement. But that can be difficult.
Did you ever, and I have to ask, so did you ever have that scenario that you go out to dinner with the insured and you have this great conversation, you get them on board, and then you go to mediation the next day and they're like, never mind. Never mind everything we talked about last night, Dale. I'm not settling this claim.
when the wine wears off.
Yeah.
No, I was lucky. Almost every time they stuck with the program once we got them. And then we were able to get most of these. Most times things did resolve. It's a long day and it's painful, and everyone's got to do the dance. And at the end of the day, they go away. I had one the other day where my insured did say he had to go to the CEO, and he said, for the final approval, and we had been meeting all day, and he said, all right, I got approval. He said, I blamed you. He said, I told him I didn't want to settle. I don't think we should settle. But the guy from the insurance company, making me do this. And I said, that's fine. You can blame me all day long. So
absolutely.
That works.
I tell my kids that all the time. If you don't want to do something, just say my mom won't let me.
Exactly.
Like, you throw me under the bus. It's okay. I can handle it.
Yep. It's the same process. It's like the mean insurance guy telling me, I have to settle. So whatever works.
Yeah, as long as they don't say it, and then it's like, well, I didn't really agree to the settlement. It's not a mutual agreement of the minds.
It was funny. He was joking, and we were having a good time, but he was a little nervous making that call back to his CEO, because it was, very personal. They didn't think they did anything wrong. And, you can tell them, well, you're not admitting you did anything wrong, but they think, paying the money is an admission. And we tell them it's not. It's to resolve litigation. It's not, you're not admitting anything. So that's just tough. But then, when it gets settled and everything's done, and they don't have to worry about it anymore, then they do have that relief that they don't have this litigation hanging over the company.
I do feel, though, I see that a lot, though, when it's, the way litigation impacts a company, I think us who work in this so often, we sometimes lose sight at the personal attack that some companies feel when they get sued. Like I just had it the other day. I was talking to an insured on the phone, and we were talking about a claim, and they got so angry about the allegations that were being asserted against them and getting really lost in the weeds. I was like, look, I understand, like, this is not, it's not pleasing. You don't want to get sued, but we're handling it, but don't get lost in the forest about what they're looking for. And like this insured was going every allegation. He was like, well, I don't understand why he's saying that. I'm like, that's for me to worry about. But you forget that this really impacts, them to their core, and it can affect how they operate their business, and they feel sometimes personally attacked.
Yeah, that's true, especially in professional liability, because it is an attack on their professional reputation. So handling, the law firm malpractice, those were really tough on the firms. And it's really important, the confidentiality and getting things resolved. And they did have this kind of tug of war between, wanting to defend themselves and prove, that they didn't do anything wrong, and just wanting the whole thing to be resolved and behind them so they could go on with their business. So you kind of have to walk them through that whole process. And some things even the law firms don't, think about, but certainly the non-legal professionals, when the depositions start getting noticed up, you're going to have to, start preparing and presenting your employees for deposition, and it's disruptive to your business. It's probably not something you want your employees to be subjected to. So there's a lot of benefits of making it go away, as bad as that can feel sometimes.
Yeah. And I also find, like, maybe not so much when you're dealing with malpractice for law firms, but when they're unfamiliar with the litigation process, it can feel so overwhelming. And just the steps of the process. Well, like, why do we have to do this now? Why do we have to do this? And I have this conversation a lot when I have witnesses come for depositions, and they're like, okay, well, am I done? I was like, well, probably, but maybe not.
Yeah.
like hopefully you never have to hear from me again, but don't lose my number just yet. You might hear from me again.
Yeah. When you're always closing that, it's over, but it's maybe not over. So yeah, it's a really, it's a educational process for them, but it's a real wake up call too. And just the worry about, the threat of litigation. I think our insureds know how litigious things have become, how expensive it's become. We hear a lot about the social inflation. That I'm getting more calls, even like pre-claim, about, we get the ones, this happened, is this going to be a problem, and it's hard to predict. They sometimes have limited facts where they want you to kind of make them feel better. It's like, well, we did this, we haven't heard anything yet, but we're worried. Or even before anything happened, it's like, well, how do we, there's more about risk management and preventing these claims in the first place. And a lot of questions about, they'll actually read the policy and then start calling up, well, the policy says this, what does that mean? I mean, I had one the other day. There's a lot of talk everywhere, but up in New York, about climate change, and, on a D&O policy, it's like, well, we're protected from climate change claims. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by climate change claim. It's like, if it's that, I have to see the allegations in a complaint and compare it to the insuring agreement. So it's hard to just, give you any type of guarantee on something that really hasn't happened yet, somehow dealing with climate change in some way. But these are the type of things that, company CEOs and people at these companies worry about, because they're reading, and there's a lot on the internet. So you're dealing with some very nervous insureds.
And I think COVID probably, ignited some worry with that too, just because of all those business interruption claims that no one had anticipated or expected to be related to, a illness like that I think now people are a little more hyper about what's in their insurance policies when they probably hadn't thought about it that much before.
Yeah, the business interruption is those are just really interesting. And I know it's really kind of trending for the insurers on those. And, there's just a lot riding where usually you've got, a claim where if the decision goes one way or another, it can affect your insured, and in our case, with the insurance company, professional liability affect their insured. But a decision here affects just thousands of cases, because it seems like every restaurant, went ahead and filed the business interruption claim. And it's such an interesting argument over the physical damage. When you walk through that, first you have to have a finding of coverage. You have to meet the coverage requirements, and then you have to look at the exclusions. And sometimes even with the lawyers, it's hard for them to wrap their heads around. It's like, well, there's not a virus exclusion in this policy. It's like, yeah, but you don't have coverage in the first place because there was no physical damage. And you're talking about the complaints, and we have some are hundreds of pages about it's a droplet, physical damage, a droplet on a table, and it's like, well, show me the droplet, And I saw an argument the other day where the plaintiff's lawyer, is before the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and he was trying. He said, well, if you have a restaurant and there's a cat urine stain, that's physical damage. You have to come in and you have to get that taken care of. And he was saying, well, this is the same thing. And the justices weren't buying. They're like, well, no, it's not, because that's property damage. You can see this is where the problem is.
Yeah.
You can't do that with these droplet. You're saying, well, we know they're closed down because there's virus in here. And it's like, well, no, maybe not. They don't want virus to get in here. And your place isn't physically damaged. Once the, state lifts the closure, you're good to go again. It's not like we have to come in here and, rip out your bar or your floors. So those are tough arguments, but very interesting. Those are the type of things, when you get into the claims side, that you don't really think you're going to, get into. Seeing complaints with pictures of a virus droplet under the microscope. It's like they really threw in everything, but not sure those are going too far. But it's been very interesting handling those claims as well.
Yeah, it added a new a new thing to the mundane, you might have been getting a little comfortable. Let's throw this in here.
So, but there's always something new, and it's hard on the underwriting side and the claim side, predicting kind of what's coming next, and how your decisions can impact that, depending. Like cyber is another one. People jumped into cyber, and I remember thinking, how are they pricing it? Because it's so new, and we don't, you're with, now with EPOI, as long as it's been around, or, any type of these malpractice, you can look back at history. But with cyber, it was just a wild guess. They were throwing pricing out there. And of course, now the price on site for cyber coverage is going up a lot, because they think they, kind of underpriced it with all the stuff going on and all the different ways that you can be impacted by cyber. So, every day there's something different, something new, whether you're on the claim side or the underwriting side. So it's a lot more interesting than I ever thought as a career,
Right.
And it's been a great career, and I've just been really lucky in it. But I was kind of like everyone else who didn't have insurance people in the family. You kind of just fall into it, unless it's a family business. But I think once people get into it, they realize it's a lot more interesting than they think. And one of the real fun things has just been working with younger people, when we interview them and get them on board, and kind of try and get them excited about it. Where I am now, we were really lucky when all these changes happened at the end of the year. Last year, we got two people on board. One had a educational background. A lot of schools now have insurance majors, which is a great thing for the industry, because these kids come out already educated and ready to go. And our other person had background in really tough trucking claims, but neither really had professional liability experience. So getting them into these claims and on board has been a lot of fun, and it's really made the job a lot more enjoyable, having that type of help on board and a great team to work with. And that's been the fun part when you're asking before about the difference between the law firm. And I like law firms. And I think, when people say, is a law firm a good place to work? Or, was your firm, was this a good firm? It just really depends. I mean, it can be a wonderful place or it could be miserable. It's a little bit your attitude and luck of the draw and who you work for and your timing. So it's really hard to tell people, what's the better way to go, or, if a certain firm is a good place to work or not. But I really liked the team aspect of working at the company. And I never had that feeling, at least, I don't know about your firms, Megan, but ours was a little bit, you're kind of on your own. It was go out there and do your hours and find your clients. And it was even a little bit of, a little backstabbing and everyone trying to get ahead, especially on the associate. I mean, funny things would happen. Like, a partner would come, like I was saying, they'd give you these motions to argue whether they were, objections to, regs or whatever. The partner would say, there was one where he said, told my friend, I need you to argue this motion. I need you to win. You cannot lose. We need to win this motion. And it was a loser. So he went to another friend of ours and said, I've got a conflict. Can you run over and argue this motion? He didn't tell me the whole thing about having to win. So of course, my friend innocently goes over and we were newer and he, argues and he loses, of course. And then the partner, blows his top and he's like, one, why did we lose? And two, I gave it to you. Why is he doing it? And it's just, but that's the kind of stuff that you had to be watching yourself at the law firm. And, I never felt like that too much at an insurance company. It's kind of like we're all in this together as a team and we either rise or fall as a team.
I remember though being a younger associate and having not being outwardly competitive, but you would be like, well, why did she get that case? Why didn't I get that case? Do they not like me? And then you get in your head about it, like, well, that's a really big high exposure case. Like, do they not think I can handle the high exposure case? Why did I get this little case? And like, or like worrying about who you're getting work from, like which partners. And like you would be having, I would just remember having conversations with another associate, and like it would be friendly, but then in my head you're like, well, like your gears are going, like why they got this and what they're talking, and it's still competitive at its like core.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you're right. And I was never like very well tuned into that. I was, took everyone at their best. So I have situations where you'd be just sitting in your office and one of the, more senior associates would drop in and say, what are you working on? And, I was like, oh, I got this interesting new case from this partner and, I'm working on it. And, you get a few days later that note from the partner, hey, could you transfer this over to Mike? And of course, once you told him, he went back and said, oh, I saw Dale's working on this. I just did one of those, kind of the same thing. So I've got the briefs, everything already. And it went on. It was just, everyone was fighting for the hours and so it took me a while to figure out, it's like, oh, I just can't, I have to be a little more, tuned in and a little less naive when someone comes in and is making innocent conversation. It just was never, that was never real comfortable. To me, to always kind of have to be, have my radar up and like you said, wondering what the real motive for someone dropping in and talking to me is.
Yeah. And also like a FaceTime thing, I remember being a big deal. Like, oh, well, so-and-so gets in at, at 7:45 and they stay, late. And I don't know if that's ever going to change, I obviously don't, I think COVID probably changed a lot of that because the FaceTime isn't a thing, but that's like idea that you need to just always be around and be available and like put the firm before like family and things like that. My whole mindset changed as soon as I had kids, because I was like, well, you know what, now I can't stay here to compete with, Joe and Mary anymore. Like I have to go pick up my kid from daycare. And I think that actually was very helpful for me to pull out of that, that kind of that inherently competitive FaceTime thing that was going on.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's gotten better, especially now with more work from home. But yeah, definitely, back in the day when I was working, you needed to show up in the office and you needed to show up on weekends. Not that everybody did. I remember the senior partner at my firm, sometimes it just on Saturday, it was an 85-person firm, and I'd be there and he'd be there. And he'd say, well, Dale, I guess we're so slow and disorganized that we just can't get our work done during the week. It was very much more formal. There's the firm I clerked at, I remember someone asked if we could have casual days, if they could give us could we have a casual day? And the partner said, I'll give you 2 casual days, Saturday and Sunday. So it's definitely, you're expected to be, we weren't supposed to leave before the partner left. We'd all tell each other, is he gone? Is he gone? And as soon as the partner left, everyone would go. People would get creative. Some people would, you try leaving a light on or leave back, then you leave your computer on, or, they caught on to that pretty quickly and go. But those are all, now you look back at it, it's kind of fun. I remember things that would go on, like when we had a bunch of these associates on the medical team, and they were their own little group, and they worked hard, when they had their cases, but they like to go out and have their fun. They like to go to the health club and shopping. And so one of them, the associates, tells me, oh, could you go over and just file this, this motion, step up for this motion and get a date. So I step up for the motion. So I'm here for so-and-so's on this case, and here to get a date, to argue these objections to interrogatories. And the judge says, you want a date? I'll give you a date today. We're arguing. And I didn't even look at him. I'm just thinking I'm going to file. And, I just, you think quick, and you're like, well, I object to number 4. Like, what's your objection, counsel? Oh, it's overbroad, All right, noted. I object. I had never even looked at it. And so I think I got like 4 or 5 of them granted. Just saying, oh, it's irrelevant. What's your objection number 11? Oh, irrelevant, and they all right, granted. And I'm like, so I took it back. I said, when I went back to the person whose file it was, I was like, the argument was today. So I said, well, we got 4 or 5 of them, our objections granted. But next time, at least give you a heads up that I'm going into an argument.
At least you didn't say, I don't know, Your Honor, this isn't my file.
Oh, I tell you, that was you knew better. You knew better.
Yeah.
I had a professor who taught us trial advocacy, and he was a federal judge, district court judge, nicest guy, always great professor. And I remember I ended up having a case in his courtroom later on, and I was sitting there, and someone stepped up and said just that, Megan. Oh, I'm here for so-and-so, and this isn't my file. And the guy just, he got rich. He had her in tears. He was just screaming. It's like, you never step up when you're not ready. You never come into court unprepared. And he's like, we're going to argue. And she's like, I can't, I don't know. And he's like, well, you stepped in front of me not knowing your case. We're going to argue. And it was painful. It was painful to watch. So I learned my lesson. I'm like, oh boy, I am never again walking into court unless I know what I'm holding.
Yeah, that's like one of the scenarios of there's always that chatter in the courtroom, and that's when everything goes silent.
It went silent. The hush, it went. And it was a big old federal courtroom and full, and it went dead. You just feel so bad. Yeah, it was I'll never forget that. And it was even worse for me because I was like, this is a mild-mannered guy, and I'd hate to see someone who's volatile, Yeah.
Well, you feel bad, but then you're also like, why'd you say that, stupid? Like, you're better off arguing it poorly than saying that, because now, like, all focus is on you.
Yeah, you have to argue something. The judges were great. I do miss, sometimes you miss going into court, especially I was mostly in chancery court, but my favorite judge, Judge Foreman in Chicago, and he did the same thing. You'd go in on coverage and he'd say, well, counsel, I got your motion and I read over your policy. In fact, he said, I spent a good part of the weekend, you can see, and he'd hold it up and it would have, all the little Post-its and everything. And he'd say, you know what? I don't understand it. And he'd say, maybe I'm just not that smart, and I don't understand your policy. Or maybe your policy is ambiguous. And he'd say, which one do you think it is? So my choice is telling the judge he's not very smart, or telling him my policy is ambiguous.
Yeah, you got to talk around that one.
Yeah, and he loved doing that, especially, to the younger associates, just seeing how we were going to answer.
Yeah, so you don't like poop your pants. Well, Dale, we're pretty much out of time, but I wanted to wrap this up with one last question though, because you've had such an awesome career, and I could sit here and talk like shop and war stories with practice and forever. I love it. But if you were to go back and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
I think the biggest piece of advice would be to just be less anxious and nervous about everything and just enjoy it more. Because like I said, we're looking back at it now and laughing, but it wasn't very funny at the time. And it was difficult. It was stressful. Whether it was on certainly on the law firm side, but also, on the company side. But besides that, the one thing people say a lot is that you make a lot of sacrifices. I was on the road all the time, and the kids grow up. You've got kids; they grow up so fast, and it's a little hazy. Them growing up, they just were going from grade to grade. So it would have been. I could say it'd been nice to spend more time at home with the kids growing up in that. But really, you have to do what you have to do. But you have to make sure that when you are home and you're not at the office, that you really maximize the time more. And so probably I think I did maximize the time, but maybe just try and focus a little more on the time when you are home on a lot of the family things. Because it's always a tough pull, working in a law firm. It's hard when you get a case going. It's just you're needed at home and you're needed at work, and it can be a real tough, decisions where to put the time in, because both of them require a lot of time. But just enjoy the career because it goes quick, and enjoy the people you work with, and you always have to, you have to laugh, about things.
Right. And that I like your point though about like taking it a little less, not less seriously, but I because looking back, I remember I could still feel those feelings, the anxiousness and the worry. And now I'm looking back and like, what was I so worried about? I know what I was worried about. I was new. You don't want to mess up. Like you want to do a good job, but some things like, we're out of your hands. You can argue emotion to the best of your ability. And you can be right, but the judge might think you're wrong and they might deny it. Some things are just out of your hands, and you can't, get overly, bent out of shape about making sure it goes your way. All you can do is do your best, argue your points, and sometimes judges don't agree, unfortunately.
Exactly. But I try and tell the younger people, it's when something doesn't go quite right, it's that we can fix it. I said I went into insurance and law instead of medicine, because in medicine, if you really mess up, a lot of times it can't be fixed. Here, most things. That's what I loved about the law. Usually it's like, all right, you messed up, you got 30 days. You got 30 days to correct it and get it refiled. So it's been a great career, and like you said, I could talk about it all day. And it's good to find someone who's willing to talk insurance with you, because not everybody wants to.
No, I think a lot of people don't totally understand what we do either. Like my mom one time said, like, I was an ambulance chaser. I was like, no, Mom, that's not even close to what I do. I guess it's close in a way, but I'm like, stop going saying that. But she doesn't understand the insurance aspect of it either. Like she's just my mom. She doesn't get it.
Yeah, it's the same with insurance. Everyone thinks you're going to sell them life insurance. They mostly think insurance agents. So it can be hard for civilians. And
I don't blame them though, because I didn't get it either. I didn't get it through law school. I barely got it when I started working. I was like, oh wait, the insurance, like we're working for an insurance company. Like it's confusing. And no one explained it to me in law school. Like no one said that. They just said insurance defense, and no one really explained what that meant.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because a big part of our firm was medical malpractice defense, and sometimes coverage issues would come up, and I talked to senior partners who didn't get the coverage part at all. When there's like, well, there's no coverage here, they went right to defense. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, wait, there's a big coverage issue. And it was amazing that Yeah, because you just assume these guys know everything. They're senior partners of the firm, and they'd be like, they didn't know the way around insurance policy.
Yeah. Well, Dale, thank you so much for joining me. I think I could chat with you forever on this, but I do try to keep these under an hour because I think I lose people if we go over it. Well, we do go a little over an hour, but that's okay.
Heck, when it went fast.
I know it always goes fast. It goes super fast. But thanks so much for coming on, and for everyone listening out there. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to the Defense Never Rests on Apple Podcasts, and you can also find us on YouTube at the Defense Never Rests podcast.